When a woman begins to love, it is not with her eyes, it is not even with her heart. She begins with her unconscious, the sacred place where her soul speaks in symbols, archetypes, and emotion. Love for her is not a decision. It is a recognition of something ancient, familiar, and vibrationally resonant. Before the mind names it, before the heart beats faster, before words like love are ever uttered, there is a deeper knowing, a resonance, an ancient memory that awakens in her body. A woman does not fall in love through logic. She enters through energy, through the silent atmosphere you carry, the texture of your presence, the quality of your stillness. She notices not what you do, but how you exist, how you fill a room without needing to conquer it, how you sit with her without needing to impress her. She feels the emotional tone of your being, whether it invites or invades, whether it calms or disrupts. Safety, for a woman, is not merely the absence of threat. It is the presence of soul. She feels it in the way your eyes rest on her, not to consume, but to understand. She senses it in the way your anger does not fracture her reality, the way your silence does not become punishment, the way your passion is anchored rather than volatile. This resonance is primal, spiritual, pre-verbal. She listens with her nervous system to the unspoken, to the unseen. She asks herself, can I unfold here without armor? Can I be both wild and wounded and still be held? She doesn't need a man who protects her from the world. She needs one who doesn't become another battlefield. And this safety, this sacred container, it is not built on words or performance. It is revealed in the subtle, how you respond to her chaos, how you honor her boundaries, how you meet her vulnerability not as a threat, but as an invitation. It is in the way your energy doesn't pull on her, doesn't rush her, doesn't try to mold her. She notices when your presence tells her, you are free to be. She notices the space between your words, the pauses that say, I am listening, not just to what you say, but to what you feel. To feel safe is not to feel small or protected. It is to feel expanded, to feel that her fullness can exist beside you without fear of being too much. She feels when you carry unresolved anger, unintegrated pain, or the ghosts of control and shame. She feels when your energy is jagged, when your spirit is restless, when your masculinity is performative rather than integrated. She feels it all before you even speak, not because she's looking, but because she is tuned to the signal of soul. She's not testing you. She's sensing the foundation, the hidden architecture of who you are beneath who you pretend to be. She doesn't need your perfection. She needs your peace, the kind of peace that is earned in solitude, the kind of peace that doesn't get shaken when she weeps or rages or doubts, the kind of peace that doesn't flinch when intimacy exposes the unconscious. She notices if her body relaxes in your presence, if her voice softens, if her laughter flows without self-editing, if her silence is honored, not filled, because the moment she feels safe, the moment her soul whispers yes, here, something ancient inside her begins to unfold. When a woman begins to love, she does not simply see the man in front of her. She begins to recognize something far more intimate. She sees a reflection of the inner masculine she has carried all her life. Not a man of flesh and history, but an invisible image shaped by myth, emotion, memory, and desire. Deep within the unconscious of every woman lives an archetypal force, a silent guide, an unseen companion. He is not physical, but symbolic. He is the animus, the masculine within her soul. He has taken many forms over the years, the wise teacher in her dreams, the stern voice of criticism in moments of fear, the romantic ideal she chased in youth, the divine father figure who walked beside her in grief. She has always known him, though never by name. When she begins to love someone, she is not falling in love blindly. She is falling into resonance with this inner figure. The man before her becomes a mirror, not of who he is, but of who she believes love must look like. This is why love, for a woman, feels both terrifying and familiar, because in his face she may see something ancient, a symbol of strength, a presence of logic, a direction when she is uncertain, a sacred mirror to her chaos. He becomes not the answer but the echo, and she does not choose this consciously. It rises from the unconscious like a dream forming shape from shadow. She begins to notice the way he stands, the way he speaks, the way he responds to mystery, to failure, to silence. And slowly she begins to measure it, not in judgment, but in recognition. She compares him to the voice inside her, the one that taught her what trust looks like. She compares his direction to the inner compass she learned to follow when no one else understood. She compares his strength not to the world's idea of dominance, but to the stillness she has felt in moments of inner revelation. Sometimes this projection draws her in like gravity. She feels she has known him forever. But it is not him she knows, it is the image of him she has carried, and love, in its earliest and most vulnerable stages, is enchanted by projection. The animus in her does not merely desire a lover, he seeks a partner in transcendence. A man who can match her interior world not with mirrors of ego, but with mirrors of meaning. A man who challenges her not to submit, but to evolve. One who walks beside her, not in front of her. She notices his thinking. Not just what he thinks, but how he holds thought, whether his mind is rigid or reflective, whether his opinions are armor or invitations. She notices whether he sees the world through symbols, through story, through layers, or only through surface and survival. She notices if he values depth, if he respects emotion, if he can navigate the terrain of uncertainty without needing to control it, if he has made peace with the feminine, not just outside of him, but within. A woman's animus matures through her life, and as he matures, so does her understanding of love. She no longer seeks the savior, the hero, or the outlaw. She no longer wants the storm. She begins to want the mountain, the one who does not move when life does. And when she meets a man who unconsciously reflects that evolved animus, when she sees in his presence the whisper of inner truth, when she feels mirrored not in fantasy but in foundation, she notices. Not with her eyes, not even with her mind, but with the deepest, most intuitive part of herself that knows this is the direction my soul has been walking toward. Long before a woman speaks the words, "I love you," she is listening. Not to your compliments, not to your declarations, but to your emotional tone. She is listening to the presence beneath your presence, to whether your soul is truly with her when you are near. A woman does not seek endless conversation. She seeks attunement, the subtle, sacred rhythm where two inner worlds begin to mirror one another not through performance, but through felt presence. She notices. Do you look into her eyes to understand, or simply to respond? Do you pause before speaking, not out of hesitation, but out of reverence? Do you allow her words to land in you, to move through your own emotional field? This is the beginning of emotional intimacy, and she senses its depth like a tuning fork feels the hum of resonance. When she begins to love, she is drawn toward emotional transparency. She is watching not for perfection, but for relationship with self. She senses when a man is acquainted with his own inner world, when he has made the descent into his own emotional depths, and when he has emerged with the ability to sit with hers without fear. She notices whether you flinch when she cries, whether your body tightens when she expresses rage or doubt, whether you silence her with solutions instead of witnessing her with stillness. A woman in love will not ask for your wounds, but she will feel whether you have met them. She does not need a man who has healed everything, but she does need one who has turned inward and stayed there long enough to know the shape of his pain, the architecture of his shame, the root of his silence. This is the difference between a man who listens to respond and a man who listens to contain. She does not want your agreement. She wants your presence, anchored, uncluttered, and unafraid of what she brings forth from within herself. She notices your emotional availability in the spaces between logic and reaction, in the breath you take before offering advice, in the softness with which you say, "Tell me more," in the way you allow her to unravel without reaching to fix what is not broken, only becoming. For a woman, emotional attunement is not an intellectual exercise. It is a spiritual practice. She needs to know that when she is vulnerable, you do not disappear into abstraction, that when she is tender, you do not escape into sarcasm or silence, that you remain rooted, eyes clear, breath steady. She pays attention to whether your anger becomes a weapon or a revelation, to whether you apologize from fear or from self-awareness, to whether you know the difference between being emotionally expressive and emotionally available. To be expressive is to emote. To be available is to stay present with her emotion without retreating into your own. She can feel the difference. She can feel when you are spiritually evasive, using wisdom to dodge rather than deepen. She can feel when your gentleness is not real empathy, but a performance of emotional intelligence. Attunement for her is everything. She is drawn to the man who can hold contradiction, the man who knows that emotion is not a disruption to life, but the revelation of life itself, the man who no longer fights his feelings like enemies, but honors them as messengers. She sees how you relate to your mother, not in behavior alone, but in the tone of remembrance. She sees how you speak of your past heartbreaks, not with bitterness or bravado, but with the grace of someone who has grieved without building walls. She watches how you respond to her no, whether your ego recoils or your heart remains open. She watches whether your love is tied to her compliance or to her truth. She notices whether you love her for who she is, or for who she becomes when she abandons herself to make you comfortable. And above all, she notices if your presence says, "I have sat with myself, I can sit with you." If your energy says, "You are not too much, you are welcome here." If your soul says, "Even in your most unspoken places, I will not look away." When a woman begins to love, her body listens, her soul listens, but so does something deeper than instinct. She begins to feel into the substance of a man, not what he presents, but what he is made of. This is not about charisma, not about reputation, not about how well he plays the part of a good man. It is about integrity, a quiet alignment between who he claims to be and who he remains when no one is watching. She feels when the outer man and the inner man are divided. She notices when your confidence is polished, but your conscience is compromised. She notices when your humility is rehearsed, your vulnerability curated, your honesty conditional. Integrity is not moral perfection. It is the coherence of soul. It is when your words, your actions, your silence, and your energy all speak the same language. It is when your boundaries are rooted in truth, not fear. When your yes is not said to avoid conflict, and your no is not spoken to punish. A woman in love begins to measure your essence, not against what you say, but against what you do repeatedly. She observes the trail your energy leaves behind. Do you show up only when it benefits you? Do you speak kindly only when heard? Do you become generous only when watched? She begins to track how you relate to power, how you handle authority, how you navigate temptation, how you respond when she disagrees, and especially how you behave when you are tired, rejected, or unseen. That is when your character is no longer filtered. That is when your integrity if it exists, becomes visible, she does not fall in love with your aspirations. She falls in love with the choices you make when no reward is guaranteed, when there is no applause to win, when your truth might cost you admiration, opportunity, or even her approval. She watches closely whether you blame others when you are hurting, whether you shift accountability into clever justifications, whether you carry your pain like a wound to heal or a weapon to control, and she notices if your spiritual life is practiced or embodied, whether your values are worn like a mask or lived like a vow. She listens carefully not just to the wisdom you share, but to the shadow you hide. She knows real integrity is not clean, it is not sanitized. It is the man who has walked through the mud of his own contradictions and chosen honesty anyway, because integrity is not what you show the world, it's what you return to when the world is not looking. It is the ground beneath your words. It is your invisible center. She feels it when your apologies are not for peacekeeping, but for transformation, when your promises are not for appeasement, but for alignment. She senses when you mean what you say, not because you're persuasive, but because your soul does not fracture under pressure. You may be charming, but if you do not mean what you say, she will know. You may be powerful, but if your power needs submission to feel whole, she will resist. You may be romantic, but if your love is transactional, she will withdraw, because her love wants to land not in comfort, but in truth, not in the illusion of the man you hope she sees, but in the substance of the man she already feels beneath the surface. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be aligned. She needs to know that when you fall out of alignment, as every human does, you notice, you return, you own it without self-flagellation or denial. She notices whether your silence is peace or avoidance, whether your generosity is real or rehearsed, whether your kindness is a strategy or an instinct, and slowly her heart opens or closes in response to your core, not your costume. Because for a woman who loves from the soul, integrity is not just attractive. It is necessary for trust, for surrender, for safety, for shared depth. Without it, she cannot relax. With it, she melts. There comes a moment, quiet and profound, when a woman begins to love not for what you bring to her life, but for how you inhabit the moment with her, not for what you do, but for how you are. This is the sacred shift from attraction to devotion. And it begins not with grand gestures or carefully timed affection, but with presence, the ancient, rare gift of undivided attention. She is not watching for how many hours you spend, she is listening for whether your soul is with her during those hours. She is not asking for entertainment, she is searching for your rootedness, because a woman who loves with depth is not impressed by the man who performs affection. She is moved by the man who arrives fully. And she knows the difference. She knows when your time is given, but your mind is elsewhere. She feels when your words are warm, but your energy is fractured. She notices the subtle haste in your body, the underlying distraction in your eyes, the way you touch her skin while thinking of something else. Because for her, love is not about doing more. It is about being real. She does not fall for the man who checks all the boxes. She falls for the one who puts his phone down, who turns toward her when she speaks, not just with his head, but with his soul. She falls for the one who does not ask, "What do you need?" while simultaneously strategizing an exit. She falls for the one who stays in the room with his full presence, even when things get uncomfortable, even when nothing needs fixing, even when there are no results to achieve. Presence is not about solving her. It is about witnessing her. It is about allowing the sacred pause, where her thoughts can unwind, where her silence can breathe, where her soul can exist without commentary. She notices if you can be still. If you can hold space for her emotions without turning them into burdens, if you can sit with her grief without minimizing it, her joy without competing with it, her uncertainty without rushing to define it. Performance is the need to be seen as good. Presence is the freedom to be true. Performance tries to curate moments. Presence allows them to unfold organically, chaotically, beautifully. She sees when you overcompensate, when you strive to be the perfect man rather than the honest one, when you use charm instead of depth, when your gifts are substitutes for your gaze, when your plans are substitutes for your patience. A woman who is rooted in herself will not trade her peace for someone who performs well but vanishes emotionally when the mask falls off. She would rather sit alone in silence than share space with a man whose heart is elsewhere, performing a role he thinks love demands. She values a quiet moment of real presence over a loud moment of scripted romance. She values the man who asks, "How is your soul today?" and waits for the real answer. She values the man who dares to be slow with her, who dares to move in rhythm with her breath instead of trying to pull her into his pace. She notices if your love is choreographed, if it mimics what you've seen or read, but lacks the fingerprints of your own truth. She notices when you say the right things, but your spirit never settles beside hers, because what she longs for is not the man who dazzles her, but the man who doesn't disappear when life becomes unremarkable. The man who shows up not just when love is exciting, but when it is quiet, mundane, and raw. She yearns not for the fireworks, but for the campfire, not the spectacle, but the steady light. And when you bring her presence instead of performance, when your time is not measured in effort but in essence, when your attention says, "There's nowhere I'd rather be than here," something ancient in her begins to feel at home, not impressed, but safe. Not dazzled, but known, not seduced, but met.